Happy Wednesday, everyone. I don't know how, and I don't know even when, but we've been doing these videos for, well, way over a month, nearly 2 months now. And the feedback's been amazing, so thank you so much for the feedback. If you're still one of the 3 or 4 people watching, that's fantastic. If you're coming to these late, thanks for coming to these late. But what we've been doing is we've been trying to get this amazing animals website to a point where we're kind of happy with it. And one of the things that we're still not happy about is the content. I want it centered, and I want it to be centering on larger screens. We looked at the boxes example yesterday, so if you haven't seen that video, please watch that first. But we need to transfer that concept onto what we have here with the amazing animals. And we've got these elements, well, that are positioned in specific ways, and so we need to be very clear on where we want all of these elements to be once we put some of them in the box. So let's just go through this and see how we go, right? Starting at the layer here where we have the body, we need to create that div and give it that ID of container, because the container is going to contain all of these things. So we have our content and we have our menu that are inside the container. Very similar to the red and the blue box example we were just looking at. And when you think about these boxes, by putting them inside of a container, and let's just give the container a bit of form, the container, or his job, is to make sure that all of these elements adhere to a specific set of rules. And one of these rules will be that they're all within this 960 pixel space. But when we write this and we save it, weird things happen. Now, on a good note, we've got the background here for the white area clipping at 960, which is what we wanted. So when you zoom out, you'll see that. But from the not so good news, we've got these floating elements, same as this one, same as that one, and that's because they don't recognize the new div, the container div that we made, as an element that they should be adhering to. So they think that the body element, which is the browser bit, which is why these things adhere to the browser, is important, more important than the new box that we made. And the way to kind of trick it to do that is to say that, look, this container is going to have a position which is going to be relative. Now I say that because what we're doing is we're basically informing we're informing the actual browser that when it renders these elements, that this element should have a little bit more importance and be positioned in the flow relative to other elements. So therefore, it picks up these floating elements which, even though they were inside the div, weren't listening to it due to the specific instructions that we gave them. And so now that we've done that, it's fixed up the menu items, but it's unfortunately put that content box on top. And the reason for that is because, if you remember from the boxes example, when we looked at the boxes, when we got rid of the red box, the whole thing collapsed, right? It went smaller to the smallest element. And if we got rid of the blue box, it all just goes away. The relevance of that for what we're trying to do here is that the only element that's got a height is this menu element. And therefore, what happens in the browser is this element here believes that it should actually adhere to the bottom right of the very bottom of that particular element. And so the way to fix that is we can go in here and we can give it like 2000 pixels in height, which will push the whole thing out. But again, what happens then is that it's at the very bottom of that whole container. So not exactly what we want to happen. So there's another thing that we can do, which is, change this to a percent. I need to put a semicolon in, otherwise it won't work. But that also makes this height, the specific height that we were talking about before. So there's a couple of gotchas in this sense, and I'll just make this 600 pixels so we can see it. That when dealing with this particular space, you have to understand what people are seeing and how they're going to kind of respond to that. And the reason we still have this background tiling is because we haven't really moved the background image from where we wanted it, originally, which is the body, into the container, which is where we want it now. And if we do that right, then that's what we get. The other thing to make this clearer where the boundaries are is I'm going to just set the background color here to be black, and that'll mean that we can see that black space here. Finally, just to kind of keep it in line with what we were doing with the boxes, is we need to go in here and tell the margins to be automatic. And once we've done that, the whole thing gets centered, and it doesn't matter what we do in terms of that, it'll be nicely centered and positioned where we want it to be. So those are things to be really mindful of, and if you understand them from the boxes example we were playing with, we've just adapted the same principles here. We have these menu items, and they're now going to be positioned relatively to this, but absolutely to the edge of that. And same with this box. As for the background image, we've set that background image as a background image of this particular div. So now this div has that background image, but the body has that particular color, which we can make any color you want. And in this case, if we did zoom out a little bit more, you can continue to see that even on a large computer, this will be nicely centered and it'll look nice or as designed for other people. But when you do zoom in, you'll see that the people that are seeing this on a smaller computer will just have to scroll over to the side, but the actual layout that you've designed will still be adhered to because of the rules that you've specified. So always be aware that doing these kind of things is primarily for you to make your design look a specific way for people, and if you do want your designs to be more fluid, they'll look different on every single device, but that might not be your intention. So do keep that in mind when you have a look at this stuff. Anyway, hope you were able to follow along with that. If you haven't, just again refer back to this, and it should work for you.